Well, I grew up in a rural area in Adair County, Oklahoma. At the time I lived there, the community was about 90% Cherokee, maybe more. Poverty was widespread, very difficult to make a living. My stepfather was a farmer and he drilled water wells. And my mother worked in the fields, picking beans, picking strawberries. Well, when I grew up, a lot of the Cherokee men had served in World War II and served in Korea. It was a tradition, Cherokee tradition, to serve, and it was my duty to the country and out of a sense of obligation to Cherokee ancestors. 2 months before I graduated from high school, I joined the Army. I was so anxious to go, and then when I got out of high school, 2 weeks later, as I said, I was at Fort Polk, Louisiana. Ended up at Fort Knox, Kentucky for armor training. Spent, I think, about 10 weeks there. I wanted to go to Vietnam as soon as my training was completed. But it was explained to me that we have so many people wanting to go to Vietnam that we're taking only the best trained. Next best thing we can do is Korea. And I was stationed in Korea with the 2nd Infantry Division. Their patch, beautiful patch, as I recall, a large black shield, big white star. Inside that white star was the head of a chief wearing a war bonnet. And when I got to Korea, there were 2 units you could go to. And when I saw that patch, I said, oh God, let me go there. Served 10 months in Korea before I went to Vietnam. Ended up in Vietnam, went to the 25th Infantry Division, 3-quarter Cav, 3rd Squadron, 4th Cavalry. Served in the infantry track for about 3 months, and the platoon sergeant learned that I had been trained as a tanker. So he came to me and said, will you please come on my tank? If you do, I'll get you promoted. January 30th, the unit was supposed to go to a place called Dao Tiang. And Dao Tiang at that time on the base itself was a pleasant place to be. Hot dog stands and they'd sell Kool-Aid. Dao Tiang was a treat. Guys were really partying, getting geared up to go to Dao Tiang, and all of a sudden the direction or orders changed. They said there is a squad of VC breaking into the wire at Tan Sanut. You need to go down and put an end to it. There were only about 60 of us that went down in those 2 platoons, but instead of a squad, say 6 or 7 or 10 North Vietnamese, we encountered over 2,000. They let us go right into the middle and then cut loose. Within a very short period of time, a couple of minutes, the lead platoon was pretty much wiped out. When the Tet Offensive started, being on a tank was devastating. If you go on a tank, you've got an iron coffin. It's just a matter of time. The enemy went to great lengths to take out the tanks. If a tank got hit by an anti-tank rocket called an RPG, most of the time it wiped out the tank and destroyed the crew. I took over the tank and placed as much fire as I had available. I believe I had a total of 64 main gun rounds. I fired as many as I could, and at one point I had a misfire. And the danger with a misfire, the longer it stays in the chamber of your main gun, the more you face a problem called cook-off. In other words, the chamber is so hot of the main gun that it'll cause that thing to just explode. So I took it out, burned my hands, threw it off the tank, was able to resume firing, and then a little bit later I got another round that would not fire, and so this time I was more aggressive in getting it out. But I fired all my 90. I used the 50 caliber. I burned out a barrel or 2 of that, used up all my ammunition. There were North Vietnamese advancing real close to my left, and I couldn't direct any tank fire in that direction because I'd hit the guys wounded, still surviving in the ditch. So I got up on top of the tank with my M16 and drove them back. Our commander was a gentleman named Glenn Otis. That day he was shot down 4 times, and he just kept going back. And the 4th time he was shot down, he crashed behind my tank. You know, I saw his helicopter coming in, and I just thought to myself, what is going on? This is like out of a movie. And I got one of his M60 machine guns and put it up on top of the tank and laid down a lot of fire on the North Vietnamese until it was hit by some type of explosive. And I just remember a big flash, a lot of blood coming out of my head, but I just kept going. Of course, that M60 was in two pieces. I'm looking at my gun, it's like a toy, you know, it's torn in half. It didn't look good. So I got 2 or 3 guys, 2 Native Americans, I call Indians, got our tank driver, and we went down the ditch, took up a position to hold off the North Vietnamese, and it looked like that it was almost over with. But all of a sudden, a sister unit in the cab came down, turned the tide, and drove the North Vietnamese back. You know, in the movies, the cab is always saving non-Indians from Indians. And here's the 3 Indians being saved by a sister unit of cab, you know. I was wounded. I was put on a Chinook helicopter. Left me, there were 23 bodies on that helicopter, and it flew me to the 12th Evac, I believe, hospital in Cu Chi, and that was the end of my day. July the 7th, my tank was hit. Bill Watts came out of that tank in a ball of fire, went way up in the sky. We rolled him in a blanket. I was at the hospital to see Bill Watts. I didn't recognize him. He was much larger than normal. The burns he had were fierce, and I knew he was dying. Afterwards, I went out, I sat down, I just cried and cried and cried. I really felt like it was my fault. And I was sitting there, there was a Vietnamese family to my right, and they had a young girl, happy child. And then all of a sudden she turned her whole face to me, and it was blown away on the right side of her face. I just thought to myself, no more. I can't take this anymore. The Army came out with a deal that if you had 5 months or less left in the Army when you left Vietnam, the Army would let you out early. I came home in December of '68, married a girl, March, I guess, of '69, and then went to college, and I worked kind of migrant farm work for a company called Green Giant. There's a bunch of boys from a place called Cookeville, Tennessee, I believe, all going to law school, and they encouraged me to go, so I ended up going and graduated in '76 and went to work when I got out for a large law firm, and then worked for a number of corporate entities, a number of oil companies. Oil traditionally has been real big in Oklahoma. A very gracious lady named Wilma Mainkeller appointed me to that Supreme Court of the Cherokee Nation, and I served for 12 years, and I resigned in '99. In Vietnam, towards the end, we had a new captain come in. Never knew why for a long time, but he hated me. Just hated me with a passion and threatened to court-martial me and what have you. In 1996, I attended a reunion of the unit I served with in Vietnam, the 3-quarter Cav. The gentleman who was the commander of that unit at the time hosted that reunion, Colonel McGowan, wonderful man. And I asked him, I said, why in the world did that guy treat me so bad, that commanding officer? He said he was a racist. That's why he was so hard on me. 81, 82, somewhere in there, I got a call. I had had brief contact with General Otis because in Vietnam he had told me a few days after Ton Son, he said, I'm going to recommend you for the Medal of Honor. And because of some shenanigans in that so-called orderly room, it never happened. The Medal of Honor ever was butchered intentionally. He asked me, what happened to the Medal of Honor? And I told him. He said, well, someday we have to get that straightened out. I just felt like that, you know, it's just one of those things that would never happen. And around 10 or so, he said, we need to get started on it again. Finally got it turned in 11. General Otis died in February of 13. Finally, 31st of May, 22, I got a call from President Biden. He said, I'm going to award you Medal of Honor. He said, this is a big deal. And then somewhere else in the conversation on down the road, he said, this is a big deal.
Specialist 5, Dwight W. Birdwell, distinguished himself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty while serving with C Troop, 3rd Squadron, 4th Cavalry, 25th Infantry Division in the Republic of Vietnam on 31 January 1968. Specialist 5 Birdwell's extraordinary heroism and selflessness above and beyond the call of duty were in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army.
The Cherokee Nation recently honored me. They have a Veterans Memorial. The Cherokee Nation is very dedicated to honoring veterans. At that memorial, the Cherokee Nation had constructed a bench with my name on it and picture of the Medal of Honor, and it's very pretty. I never wanted the Medal of Honor. All I wanted was a fair consideration. General Otis got me that fair consideration. This medal is a consequence of God keeping me alive at Tonsanute, but it's for the unit. It's for the men who served with me. That's in honor of those who fell and their families that day. You see, the honor belongs to them. The honor belongs to the 3/4 Cav and the 25th Infantry Division. I was just simply a tool or instrument used to bring honor. Very, very proud to have been a member of the 25th, member of the 3/4 Cav. Regret very much the loss of life. This Medal of Honor is for them.